Hi, everybody. Welcome to this women's panel with the Davis Phinney Foundation. My name is Devin Fulford. I am the Director of Education and Content at the Foundation, and I am joined today by these amazing women who are going to share some of their thoughts and experiences about living with Parkinson's. So, Jasmine, I'll start with you if you just want to tell us your whole name, where you're located, and perhaps when you were diagnosed.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Starr. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I've had Parkinson's since I was 14. I have juvenile onset caused by genetic mutation, and I was diagnosed at 18/20. It's kind of been a long diagnosis period. I had DBS when I was 21 in 2015, and I am 29, almost 30 now. So,
Karen, we'll go to you next.
I'm Karen Frank. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's when I was 47. I am 53 now, and I lived with Parkinson's with my father having Parkinson's and other family members. I also have genetic cause of Parkinson's.
Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra Chu. I live in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I was diagnosed in 2020, just shy of 31, and right now I am 35.
And Terry.
Hi, I'm Terry Lemers. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was diagnosed back in 2018. I was 42, almost a month shy of turning 43. I'm 49 now. And yeah, just glad to be here.
Thank you all so much. We're so glad to have you all together today to talk about some of the stuff that you're just dealing with living as a woman with Parkinson's. So, one of the things that everyone living with Parkinson's experiences is new and unexpected challenges navigating relationships. So, let's talk about anything having to do with relationships. Who wants to try to tackle this one?
I can start a little bit. This is a topic I feel like it just kind of keeps kind of coming up in my household from just because it's a shifting disease and your condition changes. And I'm lucky enough to kind of have had like a bounce back where I'm feeling a little better than I did about a year ago. But I think just the role that you play in, I'm married and I've got 3 kids. And just the dynamic and the role that I played in our household. I was home with the kids for many years. And then I was kind of home with the kids and volunteering and things like that. I worked really hard, but didn't get paid for a lot of things I did. And just at the time I was going to go back into the workforce is when my diagnosis came across the table. So we had to kind of realign that. And then just some of the roles that I historically played with organizing things behind the scene, kind of just making space for the kids' issues that came up, planning dinners, planning our events, travel, et cetera, like that. Just how does that shift and navigate? What things can I do? What things can't I juggle anymore? Just everything, just kind of how that plays out in our household. We're kind of shifting that and navigating that right now, and it's really challenging because it's one part like I want to do what I used to do, and then sometimes I just can't. I can't handle all the multitasking. Or like if I'm going to go to a big, huge event that's social, I can attend it, but I can't do all the other planning. Like I can't gather everybody to my house for dinner first and then arrange the whole evening and figure out who's going to get there and who's going to organize the fun part of the entertaining that I used to enjoy. Now, if it's a really big event, like I need to just show up for the event, and it might take me longer to get ready for the event so that I can be on for the event that I'm going to and things like that. It's I don't know how to explain it, but it's just kind of a shifting role where instead of the lead role or the person behind the scenes doing all the string pulling, I now kind of have to show up. And sometimes I'm okay with that. And sometimes I'm not. And a lot of times I don't have a choice. If I'm going to attend the event, that's kind of how I have to make it happen.
yeah, there's such a I recently just one of my best friends just got married. Just like a week ago, and I went to her wedding, and it was amazing, and I had so much fun. But I had to leave earlier than a lot of other people just because it's like I knew when my body was done. And that's sort of something I feel like definitely even 15 years in is still kind of frustrating, you know. But having that acceptance of like it completely changes the way that you're able to interact with the world, and you know, to do the things. It's like you have to budget for an event, right? Like you have to like, okay, I know that my body, I need to rest before and I need to rest afterwards. Like I know that if I go to this, I'm not going to be able to do something the next day that's really active. Like it's like you kind of constantly have to plan for Parkinson's in your life. And that's sort of something that is just from the I think the beginning of the diagnosis on. Or the beginning of your symptoms, you're not diagnosed immediately. Like adjusting to that part of your life is hard, but it's kind of something that is always there. Like you always have to the longer you go, the more you understand your body, but um and you know, I think the easier it gets to accept. But it's also like kind of always the balance of like, okay, I need to always make sure that I'm planning for my Parkinson's.
That's a
So
great way.
with
Go ahead.
so with me, my Parkinson's symptoms started shortly before I got pregnant. So I dealt with my pregnancy exacerbating my Parkinson's symptoms. So I was at my worst when I gave birth to my daughter. So with me navigating motherhood with she'll be 5 next week, with an energetic child, and like letting her know when I do need my breaks, or like why mommy needs to lay down and rest, listening to my body, or like when we are playing and I do have to go grab my medicine. Oh, mommy has to go get my medicine. Oh, okay. Like, because she understands that that is what helps me continue in my day. So, being able to navigate motherhood with a small child, has been difficult, but it is nice seeing her have compassion for me, and like knowing that medication is part of my day multiple times a day, and seeing her recognize within herself as well, like, oh, my body's tired, so I'm going to listen to my body too. I'm going to go take a rest also while you take a rest. So that has been interesting to navigate as well.
It sounds like you're teaching her some really crucial life lessons that she might not otherwise have learned at a
Yeah.
very young age. So I
Sounds
think
awesome.
that's a really lovely thing.
I think we were kind of talking about how our symptoms intersect with our relationships a little bit. I had a night last night, which is sort of some of my symptoms that are most disruptive to my life are when I have GI issues. I know, Jasmine, you talked about this before, but severe nausea that just comes on all of a sudden and can be really crippling to me. Just, I don't deal with it very well. And we were talking a little bit before this started about guilt. I feel guilty when I don't handle a symptom well. I feel guilty when I complain about a symptom. And mostly this revolves in my relationship. I think that I hear a lot of people talk about someone with Parkinson's and say, oh, you know, they were awesome. They never complained. Or, you know, like that's a badge of honor and something we should strive for, to not complain. And I find it hard to balance between communicating what's going on in my life and sharing my experience with my husband, for example, and complaining. And I don't, I've tried, actually, I've noticed myself, like I take a bird's eye view of myself and I say, am I complaining? First of all, I'm gonna have to ask myself, is it wrong to do so? There's an assumption that there is. I'm sure there's sort of a tipping point at which complaining becomes burdensome to someone, but that line between communicating what's going on with me, I feel sometimes I have to restrain myself so I don't affect the other person. negatively. And some of that might be my own sort of baggage that I hold and beliefs about what it means to talk about what's going on for me. And it's also, it consumes my day. And so it's hard not to talk about what's going on because that is what's going on. So there's sort of like a want to connect and there's a want to disconnect. And reconciling that balance is hard for me at times, especially when it's something that I'm really struggling with that's causing me a lot of discomfort. So I don't know if you guys have that experience at all.
I think that, Karen, that's such an interesting observation that you say how if you're not complaining, it's like a badge of honor, like it's something you should be striving for. And I wonder, do you think this is something that women feel more than men?
Well, I question a little bit. I had an experience with one of my siblings, a male, brother, who I asked to be sort of harshly sort of direct, or not harsh, but be direct and honest with me about how you think I'm dealing with things. And the feedback I got from him is, well, Dad never complained. He never complained. And, I was having a psychosis and hallucinations related to my medication. And my brother even made a joke how my dad used to talk about little green men that he saw, and he never complained about it. And I thought it was interesting because in my mind I was like, think about this, you're the child of that person. Maybe he didn't complain to you, but I know he complained to my mother. And I know my mother carried that burden. And I think my father, and I hear some of you talking about your relationships with your children, and a lot of people I think want to protect their children, but there's something also about the truth of something and being transparent and authentic in your experience, not within reason. I mean, a child can only hold so much. But when you ask about the difference between men and women, I don't know. I don't know if it was that it was coming from my father and his view of his own father. But, I took that very personally, and it caused me to retreat emotionally to a place where I felt kind of lonely. And sometimes I do, because I feel like with my family, and it's all men, basically I have brothers. I feel like I have to sort of hold it in and talk to somebody else about it.
We need space to grieve, and that is so deeply vital. And I think that's a huge part of like why support groups are so vital. Because it's like if you don't say this freaking sucks, sometimes you're gonna go crazy. And then, I think that there's a point where like, if you ruminate in it constantly and you never are able to get past that grief point. And when I say get past that grief point, I don't think there's like a point you get past it. It's a constant thing. It's a cycle. Like I think that keeps going, like you have to, there's always like a sort of a flux of balance of like, complaining and being positive, I think continually go throughout our lives. It's not like there's a point where you just like become positive after complaining from you're done with that. But it's like the space, like your partner, and like there's people who, you don't put the burden on your young child, but they don't need to see everything. But different, it's like who in your life is that space. And I think that patients often do that for each other. Like I think that we hold that space for each other, and that's like a super vital thing about support groups. It's like both celebrating and grieving together. And that's definitely a thing I think with our partners. That's an interesting balance.
Yeah, that resonates with me, is that fine line between kind of like commenting on what's going on versus it coming as a complaint. And then I have massive guilt because I just feel like there's so many people who have even more things going on. So sometimes that keeps me from sharing symptoms and even educating others about it, because I'm like, well, I just have Parkinson's. I have gait. There's people who've never walked, and I'm complaining that I can't walk correctly today. So it's kind of panning out, panning in all the time. But it is a fine line because sometimes I think I'm kind of just commenting about the state of affairs in the house so that everybody kind of knows like, hey, like I'm waiting for some meds to kick in just so they know that like it's going to take me a few minutes. And then that can be perceived on the other side, depending on what's going on by, maybe you're complaining. I also have to do the caveat that I have teenagers in the house at the moment. So what might have resonated different with them a couple years ago suddenly maybe strikes a chord if they want to go do something in a hurry. But it's a fine line. But I find that more and more, I feel like I'm narrating. I kind of try to make it more of like a, hey, I'm doing this because I'm waiting for it to kick in. And then, like, for example, we just got back from vacation, which was lovely, but it's not as laid back as I'd like to be from my point of view, because like Karen was saying and Jasmine as well, I'm always having to plan. I'm having to plan to wing it. So even when I'm getting up in the morning, I'm trying to go, well, how soon will everybody else be up and want to be moving? So I take my meds at the right time so that an hour later kicks in and I can go for my jog, or I can go for my walk or bike ride, my most active thing of the day with the kids. Versus being like, sorry guys, you guys just got, but mom's out of here. And then I'll be back, which they would have been perfectly happy with as well. I just wanted to try to be on the same time schedule as everybody around me. So I find like I have to be a little bit more, not militant, but specific about my time and trying to gather people's plans the night before about what they want to ballpark do for timing so that I can be as a part of the day as possible, as much as possible, just because I don't like to be missing out and all that kind of stuff. But it's hard to have to plan when everybody else can kind of wing it.
Do you guys ever feel like, and this is sort of a little bit tangential, but like, and going back to what Karen said about nausea, that's like one of the symptoms that I struggle with the most, because I mean, my GI stuff is like on the severe end. I actually get most of my nutrition through tube feeding at night. And I take all of my meds through a feeding tube. And I have for the past 9 years now. Because my stomach and GI tract just don't move nearly enough, which, everyone with Parkinson's has some degree of GI dysmotility, whether it's a little bit of constipation or whether it's, gross dysmotility like I have. But I find that like nausea and I do end up throwing up multiple times a week. And I feel such a burden of that. Like when you're nauseous and it's like you people I think are always like, oh my gosh, like, if I throw up in the car, like, into a bag, it's fine. Like, please just ignore it. Like, I don't want a huge, be like, oh, do you want to sit in the front? Like, can I get you water? Like, whatever. It's like, oh my gosh, no, just like ignore this. Like, I'm okay. Like, this is just a thing that happens like, 4 times a week or whatever. I'm good. But I feel like there's sort of a weird pressure to hide your symptoms sometimes from people. Like I don't want to burden other people with my symptoms. Like I don't want to make other people around me fuss over me. And I feel like maybe that's something that women, I think, especially kind of, being more of that, like the naturally the kind of wanting to take care of everything. And especially like, within our families, it's probably something that I think we all probably struggle with, but like that balance of trying to like, okay, like these are my symptoms. If they happen, you see them like whatever, versus like that kind of like burden to hide them. I don't know if that resonates with any of you guys, but
I have nausea is one of the symptoms. I have a hard time. I'll be honest. When I'm laying there and I think it's never going to go away, I'm like, I don't want to live like this. I know that's dark. It sounds horrible, but that's just one of those symptoms that's miserable to me, and it makes me fearful. And sometimes I do withdraw, but last night I remember just saying to my husband, like, I have to go to the bedroom, can you take care of dinner or dishes? And I just left everything. I woke up to a messy kitchen this morning, and luckily it passed, and I woke up this morning relieved and things were moving and everything. But I pull away because it's just very hard to deal with that one for me. For everyone, it's different, but that one's really hard. I don't know how to deal with that. And I think sometimes if it comes and stays, like I'm out. And, I don't know that I would actually do that, but it's a hard one. I don't know if you guys have a symptom like that just really, or a fear of a symptom that really get you that way? I'm curious.
Absolutely. I think Parkinson's is the gift that keeps on giving. I remember always hearing that at different places. And like early on, I used to think like, wow, I'm leveling up really quickly and much faster than I want to. Because every time I would kind of get one under control, then it'd be like, oh, you've got that. Here's more, and it'd be like, you kind of feel like the Monty Python, this is just probably aging myself here, where they're cutting off the leg and then that's spraying the blood and then the arm and you just keep trying to, and that's kind of how you feel. You're like, okay, I can figure out how to work around the lymph. Okay, now I figured out how to this. Oh, now I got something that feels like carpal tunnel. Oh, now my stomach's going to get in the mix. And so, I don't feel good and I have to time my meds. It's just a funny, I mean, you have to have fun with it because it's just it can be so obnoxiously overwhelming at times. But for me, there isn't one particular symptom. But I had my highs and lows with that. And I think just like we were mentioning about some of the other, the sorrow or the sadness in the morning, is I think for me, I feel like you have to kind of hold space for it and kind of work through it a little bit. And then it does feel better on the other side. It's like, get that cry, have that moment, and just go, this too will pass. But I think the fear sometimes is there because you don't know, is this just a random symptom today? Is this for an hour? Is this my new reality? Is it like next cycle of meds will go away? I think sometimes that unknown can become just this really big beast that you don't know how to manage. And it is nice that to a certain degree, the longer you have it, that for me, that part kind of calms down a little bit. But I think that unknown is so hard.
I have a friend who's much more advanced than I am, and she's experiencing a different stage of her disease now, which is unrelenting and painful and difficult, and it's not getting better. And, she'll talk to me about what's going on, and a lot of people will say to her, oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay, for her. And I know that. And so I don't try to say that to her. I say, whatever it's like, I'm going to be there with you. We'll do it together. You're not alone. Not every day's the same. Things that were really true that I can say because, sometimes you can't put lipstick on it and make it better. I mean, there's some things we can do, right, with our attitude and within reason. But sometimes there's an acknowledgement of the challenging things about it without minimizing them or ignoring them or pushing them away. But also, like you said, Jasmine, not ruminating on them either.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think with like being hopeful about it when there's something that like is not gonna get better, the one hope thing that I kind of like hang on to is that like there could be a solution that I find in the future to help me deal with something. For me, pain is probably the biggest, like for you, like with the nausea, like the symptom that's just like feels impossible. And I definitely took way too long to get help with that. At one point when I was just like, I'm just tired of crying myself to sleep every night. Like I need to get pain control because it's just getting ridiculous. And I finally was able to see a pain management doctor who helped me deal with that. And so between medication and now I get Botox in a couple of places, and that really helps with pain. Those solutions that I didn't know about a couple of years. The Botox I've been doing now for about 2 years, and that's been in my jaw because dyskinesia and dystonia, my jaw just kind of destroyed it. And I didn't expect that solution, but it presented itself to me. My doctor said, hey, why don't we try this? The idea that like you might find a solution that helps you live with it, not that it's going to go away, but that like when things feel unmanageable, the one thing that I like is hopeful is that like, okay, maybe there might be some kind of solution to help me live with this. But I also I love that like, okay, I'll be there with you through it, and that like you won't go through this alone, and that like you will handle it even though it really
I really love that example that you mentioned, Karen, as well, because I feel definitely in my case, and it seems like in your cases too, like as children, we didn't have that opportunity to like say our truth and for maybe our parents to say, hey, this is your truth. It's hard right now versus like, hey, suck it up, or like, good kids don't complain. So I feel like a lot of that transfers over to what we feel now as adults. So I feel like being a mother has forced me to change these kind of negative thoughts that I kind of carried over from my childhood, because my daughter does like to mention to me, she says, Mommy, I want to talk about what I'm feeling. And she, of course, some things I'm like, oh my goodness, of course, this is a child's problem, but it is her truth. And she's allowed to have those feelings without, me having to throw toxic positivity her way every time. And so I really appreciated hearing what you mentioned to your friend, because that is definitely what I would have wanted to hear also.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And Jasmine, your point about there's something that will help us around the corner. For myself, my journey was kind of a roller coaster in terms of early on, I didn't need meds for a while, but then when I went to say, hey, I would like a pharmaceutical option for this, I went for years without anything working. And so I had got to the point where I was scheduling myself for DBS, which is the deep brain surgery. And as part of that, I had tried a medicine that I had already tried 2 or 3 times with no success, but as part of the trial. And this time, 6 weeks in, having the side effects that were terrible and worse again, this time it worked. So you just never know. As I feel like it's just that extra story of hope that you just never know.
I think too, sometimes there isn't a physical solution. Sometimes it's spiritual or emotional solution or social, finding the support you need, or, everyone has a different belief and faith system, but, there's strength in that I've found. And I've developed as a human being, as a woman, in my faith because of this experience.
Mm.
And that shapes how I deal with other experiences and as well, and building that social community. I have to have friends with Parkinson's. I know I can call upon any of you at any moment, and I'm going to have, a family of people with Parkinson's who understand, and I don't have to explain it. It's nice. But that helps. It helps to tolerate the intolerable,
Yeah, I mean, humans are social animals by nature, and having those connections, I think, is so crucial. And one of the questions that we get from folks quite a lot is what if I don't have a care partner? What if I don't have a person? What if I don't have living family? What would you all suggest? Jasmine, I know you touched on the idea of support groups, but what would you all say to someone who posed that query to you?
Gosh, before in the 4 years that I didn't have a diagnosis, um, it just felt so like the world felt really lonely. Like I felt very like I misunderstood in that way. Like especially as like a young person, like no one really got what I was going through. And then once I had a name, at that point it was Facebook was kind of like a new thing. And the support groups had just moved from like forums, like Tap Talk forums onto Facebook. And it was all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, okay, the world really just opened up for me then, because it was like, okay, suddenly there's a bunch of people who understand what I'm feeling, and what I've been going through for the past couple of years. And that is just like life-changing and revolutionary in a way I can't really describe. And so I really think that uh that is just, and there's all, between the foundation and just lots of places online, there's so many different groups that there's a flavor for everyone. There's a place that you can find community that you'll fit in and feel comfortable wherever that might be.
Mhm.
And looking for that is really important. And that's why I would tell anybody who doesn't, especially somebody who doesn't have a really good support network, outside of the Parkinson's world, to start. especially too because there are other people who also don't have that, who are looking for that community, and also people who've navigated not having that as well, who might know how to get access to certain resources.
Mhm. I love that you immediately mentioned social media. People talk so much trash about social media, but there are really brilliant, wonderful ways that it could be used as well to connect and create community. I think that's super important. And it's something that virtually everyone can access. Even
Yeah.
if you don't have a computer or a smartphone at home, you can go to your local library and access the
I
internet.
mean,
So
there's this one, and I'll just call it out. It's the hashtag Never Give Up Parkinson's in Estonia on Facebook. Those people are just amazing. It's such a lovely group. We've actually met up in Colorado. It was kind of where we chose the middle of. We met up in Denver before the pandemic for a couple of years. Looking forward to when we do that again. I wasn't able to go to the last one, but and these are just people who I've known for a couple of years online, who we all got together and had just a really wonderful time for a weekend. It's like these people do really become family, because especially, okay, everyone with Parkinson's have insomnia, and it's the funniest thing when people post like, all right, roll call, it's 3 a.m., who's awake, and there's like 50 people like, hey, you
we're
know
all awake.
yeah, but when you're awake in the middle of the night and you're in pain and you're kind of miserable and you need someone to talk to, there's somebody else up with Parkinson's. So it helps those long nights.
So recently, when my daughter started school, I got to meet a lot of new people in my community, like new mom friends that have been literally some of the most beautiful people I've ever met. So, of course, since, we get together for play dates, I have mentioned about my Parkinson's just in case, like, if they were to see any symptoms, just to normalize it, not with like any shame attached. And they have become like a great support system too. So like you said, it's really nice when people do understand what you're going through, but you can also find people like in your community, church, or wherever it may be, that will support you and appreciate you and might be there for you during those hard times as well.
It also is a really kind of a friend tester. I found that like people really show their true colors when they know you have Parkinson's, because it's like they'll either be lame about it or they'll show you they're really great.
I
And
think
where you are.
when you ask that question, I've been thinking about it, Devin, about, for people that don't have someone or they're alone. I think that sometimes the support comes through you giving that to someone else, because no matter how disabled you feel or limited you are, you can always do something for someone, whether that's a phone call, checking on someone else. And I think getting that focus outside of yourself in some way helps to connect with other people. I think we can tend to be isolated when we're having an experience like this, and thinking that there's someone else as the solution to that isolation, and that's not always the case. Sometimes you're the solution. And if you're at home or stuck at home, and you may be calling the church and being like, is there anyone who, is sick at home and I could be their phone buddy? Or like, there's lots of ways to do something like that. And some people can actually get out and go somewhere and do something. But I think that has helped me. When I quit working and suddenly I didn't have much going on and I was really feeling sorry for myself and I didn't have a lot of social interaction, beginning to do things for other people with Parkinson's and finding myself talking to those who are newly diagnosed, I could hear myself and what they were saying. And I really realized, oh, I'm not alone. I have something to offer here, and built friendships out of that over time. So that helped, because I felt more in control of my environment and what was going on for me when I could do something about it, instead of waiting for someone else to do something about it for me.
Yeah. That's great. Those are great ideas. I love that idea of reaching out and connecting with somebody else because they need it, not because you need something. I think that I don't think everyone can do that, but I think everyone should try. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, Karen. I think again, just having the different ways to just connect with other people, whether or not it even has to do with your disease or the way you feel or anything, just having those connections is so important.
Even on social media, if somebody in one of these groups on Facebook, for example, comments about something that you could relate to, maybe directly messaging that person and interacting with them on a more personal note about whatever it is they're talking about, there might be a segue into connecting with somebody more one-on-one.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Jasmine, you mentioned the friend test, finding out kind of who in your life is I think you said lame or great, which is probably a pretty accurate description if how based on how they respond to news of your health and diagnosis. So let's just talk a little bit about that, about how your relationships or friendships might have changed. And how you dealt with that, because that's really tough. I mean, if you've got someone in your life that has been there for a super long time, and then all of a sudden they're like, ooh, you're experiencing something I don't know, I'm not familiar with, and I'm not comfortable with, and therefore I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable.
In
What do you
college,
do with that?
that's it. In college, I had a friend who I had gotten really close to. And as my health started to decline before I had DBS, she just sort of like, I mean, and I'm not sure, and who knows what it is. I think some people just have a bit of a fear of health things. And I think that some people are just not really equipped to for whatever reason. And that's okay. I'm not like mad that this person and I grew apart. It just, but because I had another friend at the same time who started really reaching out to me and meeting me where I was. Like when I wasn't feeling good, she'd be like, "Oh, hey, cool. Like, why don't I stop by with some food and we can just like hang out at your place and things like that." There's the person who became one of my best friends from college was just amazing in that, and that happened as I was not as close to the other friend who was kind of pulling away when my health got worse. She and I got a lot closer because she met me where I was. And she just had this understanding, and she's an ICU nurse now, and she's fantastic. But and it's like the people who will have that compassion, and I think the same goes for relationships. For if you're, before I'm married now, my wife and I got married in 2020, and we've lived together since late 2018. But there was a person who I was sort of dating before that, and we were like on the phone, and I ended up having a really bad GI flare. And I sort of tell this story because I ended up like I got this is when my GI stuff was a bit worse. And so we're talking and I was like, okay, hey, I'll be right back. And so I put the phone down and I ended up like throwing up for like 5 hours. It was horrible. But she was on the phone and just like didn't know what to do. Um, and then it was like this really awkward thing. And then I came back and I was like, oh my God, you're still here. Like, this is kind of horrific. But like, I basically had to like comfort her afterwards because she was like, oh, like that was so traumatic for me. And I was like, it was traumatic for you. You could have hung up. But and then it's like when I met my wife, she was just like, there was, a time where I ended up in the ER and she just sort of took it all in stride and was like, okay, cool, it's just another thing. Like she's had this sort of innate ability to just get it and to just flow with it. And that's the thing I think with Parkinson's, there's so many like ups and downs. Like if somebody can't just kind of go with it and bend to what the things that come, because it's like it's never easy, right? There's always something that comes up. Like if they're not able to like handle those things, they're not going to be somebody who can be close to you because those things are going to happen. And so it's kind of like you don't get the choice to not be a little bit chaotic, I feel like.
Yeah.
but people will show you that when you're dealing with this. Those are kind of extreme examples, but
But it's a good one. I can't imagine seeing people, the responses. I think I run into myself on top of maybe their reaction is my response to letting them in. I'm used to being like, I guess I still consider myself a strong woman, but I just kind of take it on. If I need to do more, I get up earlier, go stronger, harder, faster. And personally, I've had to revamp how I attack things and be very creative in how to do things I used to do different ways to adapt. And I feel like I think I don't want to let other people down, and they wouldn't think I'm letting them down, but I perceive that. Or like, for example, like if you go for a walk or something, like I might say no because I don't know how I will function without even giving them a chance to see how they would perhaps respond. But it's also comes to a place where I've always worked out in exercise. I've taught classes and this and that. So again, my expectation of what I should be able to do and how I should be able to manage, tell somebody what I can do, what I can't do that day, is more on me. And so I feel like a lot of the friendships that have gone the wayside for me have not been anything that they've done. It's more that I don't have the capacity to keep up in the way that I feel a friend should keep up, or whether it's again doing things or communicating. And it also hit me in a place in my life that I was kind of excited to finally give back more to others, and then suddenly I'm in a place where I have to receive it from others, and that's kind of hard to wrap your head around as well.
Yeah.
At least for me, I'm working on it. I'm getting a little better, but it's hard to express. It's hard to express to other people, I guess, what they could do that would be helpful in that moment and ahead of that moment. And that's kind of a continual learning curve. And that kind of comes in the territory for all of relationships, whether it's family or friends and such. And I find it's easier with people that I meet post-diagnosis than the wishy-washy people who I love and adore, but knew me before.
Yeah.
And maybe I haven't seen them, or maybe they'll see me, but they haven't seen me since I was doing terribly. And now I present and I'm doing so much better, which is wonderful. But yet I'm not really doing what I was before. And so it's hard to explain that, like, hey, you saw me at the gym and I looked really great, but now I'm limping around my house trying to figure out how to pluck out an email with one finger and then get myself ready in time to go pick up a carpool. Like just how much more energy it takes to do quote unquote normal life.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of changes to my friend, the way my friendships look. I have a lot more online and phone friends, I call them, because I've gotten involved in a community, distance community. A lot of friends through ambassadorship at the foundation who are part of my life. And these are some people I didn't meet until the first time in Minneapolis, actually, when we had a leadership conference. So I've known them for years and not actually met them. And because I started a support group in my own community of young onset Parkinson's, we now get together and we have parties and stuff. I never thought that we would do that, but we had a game party last time and we all played games that were hard to play with Parkinson's. We thought it was going to be fun, but it was actually not that fun. So we stopped. We were playing pickup sticks and Jenga and Operation, and we had like dueling operations, and everybody was laughing at first, but then I think we all got extremely frustrated and decided, wait, we thought this was going to be fun, but it's not. So let's just stop playing it. But we played Pictionary, and we did. It was just a camaraderie and a type of friendship that's just special and different because we could relate on certain things and laugh about it, So that's welcome. I really lost a lot of friends. I worked in a really social situation. I was in a hospital. There were a lot of people that I interacted day in and day out with. I might not have even been friends with them outside of work, but there was a lot of conversation and asking about their families and their weekends and things. And that was just gone all of a sudden. So it seemed to be replaced with deeper relationships that were built on other things besides work, and surprises have come out of that, like the friendships I've made with people with Parkinson's.
Terry, you just mentioned something about normal life. like how you have to function in, and I love putting quotation marks around normal because what a word. What does that mean for any of us, right? But let's talk just a little bit about those kind of challenges. Being in public, doing things that you might feel that once gave you no issues whatsoever, and now you've had to really change how you're navigating certain things in the public eye or in a normal routine.
Well, like Karen said, like it's constant and always, right? Like Parkinson's is always there. So it's whether you're thinking about how you're navigating or not, I know for me, I feel like I'm always planning things out. So I used to be able to kind of structure my day and kind of just wing a day. And now I usually have a little bit of a method to my madness. Like I'll tag on some errands maybe after I've done something physical and I know I'm kind of coming down off meds, but I could still, I know that if I'm not feeling great, I could use the cart as a walker kind of through the grocery store kind of a thing. I try to time things that I'm more social with better times. And it's not necessarily for myself to feel better, but sometimes it's just to get things done more efficiently. Like if I'm not doing well, like it could take me 2 hours to get through some muck of emails or something where if I'm feeling better, it takes 2 seconds. So I find I have like lists of kind of windows of time now, and I have a few options to do with those windows depending on how I feel. But I have to really let a lot of things go. Like I used to be that I'd be juggling the balls of life. And now I joke that like, there's so many balls on the floor. I wade through them. And then occasionally I go, oh, there's a ball. And I pick one up and get it done. It's so absolute opposite of my personality. I say I'm a recovering type A. And most of my friends are type A. And I still had a little bit of rogue in me. I was type A, but I'd wing it. So thank goodness I have a little bit of good life skills for both. But a quote unquote normal life, just making dinner, getting schedules done, doing errands, working, whatever they have to do. It's they're just more entailed. It's like, well, will these shoes make it the whole day? If I'm going to dress up or something, can I wear my heels all day, or do I need to back up flip-flops in the car? If I'm stubborn enough that I have to wear those heels on a normal basis, thank goodness athleisure is the normal dress right now, because some days, once I get the tennis shoes on for the day, they are staying on. It's like I'll take the 95-year-old pass where you get to keep the sneaks on all day in and out of the house. And just because it's one less thing that I retie my shoes every time and get used to. I walk a little bit different depending on whether I have shoes on or shoes off. And there's a lot of everything kind of thrown at you. But I think just the normal life, I have to plan so I can wing it a little bit more. And so I have an unnecessarily concern again about how things are going to play out. Like even if just watching kids, like I have like swim meets that I go to, for example. And so I'm trying to time my meds with getting my daughter there, but then I might still be kicking in. And so like it's how to socially interact with people and not look rude that I'm not, as we're walking up to the bleachers, that I'm not going to feel comfortable sitting quite well, like with them right there, or being trapped in the middle. Mm-hmm. So then I'll kind of linger and then go back. And some people I just say, hey, I come up with like a reason, because they don't necessarily need to know why. And other people who know I have Parkinson's, they're good at like, oh, that's just Terry. She kind of does her own thing. She'll pop back and forth, and they're thankfully wonderfully gracious. But it's hard to explain the social nuance of like, I'm not trying to be rude to you. I just can't do that. And I love that you don't know that I can't do that. That's great. But it's hard to I think we were mentioning earlier when we weren't on camera, the whole difference of with Parkinson's, a lot of times it's a silent disease where sometimes you see me and you think I look quote unquote normal. And then sometimes I look like someone who has a disability, and it's hard to explain to people who saw you in either of those parameters what the rest of your day is. So I have med cycles that are every 3 hours, which are a little tight compared to some. And I'm extremely grateful that I have med cycles that help me every 3 hours. So it's a weird mix of gratefulness. But every 3 hours I have another window, and especially like on vacation, you realize how quick those 3 hours go. Like by the time you get all organized to go do something, like, oh, I'm going back down. It's like having a newborn baby that needs to be fed every couple hours and it's so it's just there's a storyline behind the storyline that you kind of are always thinking about, like when are my next meds and when am I doing this, and can I walk to that, can I type to that, besides what you're doing. So there's like this life going on. And then behind the scenes, there's just all this other stuff that's going on that you're trying to kind of not let everybody know about.
Invisible illness is the term that you're
Yes,
thinking there. Yeah. There's it's an interesting, I'm kind of on at this point because having had it for 15 years now, I'm on the other side of that. There was a point where my illness went from being an invisible illness to being more visible. And honestly, I actually prefer it on the other side of that, because I find that like it's almost easier when people just know that there's something wrong with you, which is, a bad phrase, but um there was a point before I had DBS, I had a leg brace, an ankle foot orthosis that was custom made because my ankle would twist in really badly, it'd pronate really badly, and I'd trip over it. So I had this leg brace, and it was interesting seeing people's perceptions, because a lot of people, when I got it, were like sad for me that I got this brace, but I was actually really happy to have it because walking on a pronated ankle was really painful. And once I got the brace, I was like, oh my God, this is so much more comfortable. So it was kind of this weird balance of like, I was super glad that I had this and other people saw it as a sad thing. But it also became this sort of signal. When people saw it, they just assumed disability. And then that became a lot easier for me functioning in society. I mean, even just like parking in a handicap spot, which is placard, which I've had since 2009, it became less stressful because I was always worried that somebody was going to try to come and, fake blame me or something, where you see people being harassed like that. It has less of a worry when it's sort of like a visible thing. But yeah, no, it's a weird line, because it's kind of like you don't want to stand out, but you also do because your body is different. Yeah, it's a strange walk.
I've started doing things differently that I didn't used to. Like, I may feel okay, but I always pre-board on the airplane, because as soon as people are behind me and they're moving fast and they want to get to their seat and they're kind of pushing and I'm rushed, forget it. All bets are off.
You don't want to freeze or end up all tight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all asses and elbows, my dad used to say, but it's just, I just can't function. Like, all of a sudden someone's pushing me and I start shaking, and, I can't reach and I can't move fast enough and I get flustered. And I've just found it's just easier to just get on first. And that's what it's for, right? I shouldn't feel bad about doing that. And there's certain things I just don't do anymore. I try not to drive at night by myself. If somebody else can do it, it's just hard for me. I don't see as well. It stresses me out, which makes my symptoms worse, which makes it harder to drive. So I usually I have taken an Uber if I didn't want to, but usually I'll ask my husband to drive, or something like that. They're just little shifts in the everyday that have just made my life easier. And instead of seeing them as giving up something or losing something, I see it as a way of taking control of the situation and making it better for myself. And sometimes I'll even take a wheelchair at the airport, because it's easier for me than going through those, the turnstiles you have to go through until you get to the person to check your ID. That is really hard. So it's just easier to take a chair. And I felt about it.
Yeah, there's a weird thing, I think, mentally about it. I know I was really afraid of it when I was first ill. It was like it represented something to me. It represented like disability and like what I didn't want to happen to me, and like all of my fears. I felt like using a wheelchair was like giving in to my fears. And when I was in high school, it was our sophomore year, our sophomore year winter formal was the same day that my class was going on a field trip to the Getty Museum, which was like a very large art museum. And I knew that like if I went to the Getty Museum all day, there was no way my body was going to hang in there for this dance. And all of my high school friends were like, oh, just like have them rent a wheelchair. And I was absolutely mortified by that idea. Like, oh, hell no. Like, I'm not going to, in front of our entire class, have them push me around. Not everybody knows about this. And my friends were like really mad that like I wasn't going to come to this dance. And it was like, well, like, you're like putting yourself in pain. It's like, okay, but like I couldn't do it. Like at that point I was just not ready to do it. And so, I didn't go that night, which stunk, but and then it was before I was diagnosed, but at the end of high school, we had a Disneyland grad night, and one of my teachers convinced me to rent a wheelchair for the night because I wasn't gonna go because I was like, there's no way that I'm gonna be able to go to Disneyland all night. And I was so glad that I think she was just like, don't you want all your friends to cut in line? I was like, oh,
Ulterior motive.
yeah, no, it wasn't totally, but it was like kind of like the thing I needed to be like, okay. And so that was like the first time that I ever like accepted that. And it was like absolutely nerve-wracking. But it was also kind of like the first time I accepted it was also a big growth moment because I was like, okay, like I can handle this. And it didn't, riding in a wheelchair for a day didn't, suddenly make me more disabled than I already was. Like it all it did was meant that I could enjoy the day. Um and
Yeah.
so there's but you also have to be at a point where you can accept that. Like it's like it's a journey. Like no one can tell you when that point is, but I definitely wish it was earlier than I for me than it was.
Well, thank you for sharing about your experience, Jasmine, and Karen, Sandra, and Terry, all of you. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences because this I think probably really helps people feel less alone too. We are going to wrap up for today. So I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. And if you watch this panel and you have a question, please feel free to reach out to us. We have multiple email boxes at the Davis Phinney Foundation, but you can directly email blog, B-L-O-G, at dpf.org. So blog at dpf.org, and we can pass along your questions to the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.